Padre Pio often said that God allowed him to see certain things not to frighten people, but to awaken them. In this particular vision, he found himself standing in a place that felt outside of time, silent, vast, and filled with a weight he could only describe as divine seriousness. It was here that he saw the soul of a man who had died moments earlier, a soul that had passed from the world without a single act of repentance. The soul appeared confused at first, as many do. The moment of death strips away all illusions, wealth, pride, reputation, excuses. Everything the man once hid behind vanished instantly. He stood completely exposed, unable to pretend, unable to lie, unable to justify himself. Before him was not an angry judge, but the pure radiance of truth itself. And truth, Padre Pio explained, does not accuse, it simply reveals. The man's soul trembled under the weight of this revelation. All the sins he had ignored, denied, or minimized during his life rose before him like shadows made visible under a blazing light. But what struck Padre Pio most was not the sin itself, it was the soul's reaction. There was no cry of sorrow, no plea for mercy, no recognition of wrongdoing. Only a stunned, distant emptiness. It was not that God withheld forgiveness. Even in that moment, Padre Pio sensed mercy was being offered like a silent hand extended in overwhelming love. But the soul did not reach for it. A lifetime of rejecting grace had formed a habit of the heart so deep that repentance felt alien, almost impossible. In this first moment of eternal truth, Padre Pio understood. The tragedy of a soul that never repents begins long before death. It begins with the daily choice to ignore the voice of conscience until silence becomes permanent. As Padre Pio watched the soul, he realized something profound. This man had not arrived at this tragic moment by accident. A soul does not reject mercy suddenly. It is shaped over years, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly, by choices, habits, and attitudes that accumulate like layers of stone around the heart. Throughout his life, the man had been given countless opportunities to turn toward God, the gentle warnings of conscience, the quiet guilt after hurting someone, the soft tug of grace during moments of weakness, a sermon he once heard, a sickness he survived, a loved one who prayed for him. Each moment had been an invitation to humility, a small opening through which repentance could have entered, but every time he turned away. Not always violently, sometimes he simply shrugged it off. Other times he drowned it in distractions. But most often he told himself a lie. I don't need to change. That single thought, repeated over a lifetime, becomes a chain stronger than iron. Padre Pio saw that the man had committed many sins, but the greatest danger had not been the actions themselves, it was his refusal to acknowledge them. Sin can be forgiven instantly, but pride can harden the soul until forgiveness feels unnecessary or even absurd. In life, the man mocked those who repented. He called confession a weakness and mercy a crutch. He enjoyed being in control, never admitting fault, never kneeling, never bending. He built an identity around stubbornness, and that identity followed him beyond death. Now, in the presence of divine truth, his heart was so rigid, so conditioned to reject grace, that the gesture of repentance, simple, beautiful, transformative, felt impossible to him. Padre Pio realized a terrifying truth. A soul can be lost not because God refuses forgiveness, but because the heart has forgotten how to ask for it. Padre Pio often said that God never closes the door of mercy on a soul. Even in the very last breath of life, grace waits like a physician standing beside a wounded patient, ready to heal the moment he is asked. But in this vision, Padre Pio saw something deeply painful. The tragedy was not that mercy was absent, but that the soul refused to reach for it. When the man died, he was immediately confronted with a truth more powerful than anything he had ever known. His life unfolded before him, every word, every decision, every moment where he had chosen self over God. It wasn't a courtroom scene. There was no thunder, no divine shouting. Just perfect clarity, a truth he could no longer run from. And in that clarity, mercy appeared. Padre Pio described it as a radiant light, soft, gentle, inviting. Not forcing, not demanding, only offering. If the soul had whispered even a single word of remorse, that light would have consumed every sin, every mistake, every moment of rebellion. It would have lifted him with tenderness. But the soul didn't move. Not because mercy wasn't wanted, but because pride had become his instinct. He could not accept help, even from God. The habit of self-sufficiency, the illusion of being good enough, the fear of vulnerability, these had shaped him for decades. And in that final moment, they rose again, stronger than the grace being offered. Padre Pio felt immense sorrow as he watched. The door to salvation was wide open. The light stretched toward the man like an embrace. Yet the soul recoiled, unable to perform the simplest act, surrender. In that moment, Padre Pio understood a frightening reality. A soul can choose darkness even while standing in the presence of God's light. Padre Pio described that when the moment of divine judgment arrives, it doesn't come with thunder, flames, or dramatic voices from the heavens. Instead, it comes with a silence so absolute that it feels like the universe itself stops breathing. And into that silence, the soul is shown its entire life, not as a movie, but as a truth that pierces deeper than any earthly memory. He explained that a soul that never repents stands before God with nothing to shield itself, no excuses left to offer. Every moment of pride, cruelty, selfishness, and ignored grace rises like a weight pressing down on the soul. Padre Pio said this self-revelation is more terrifying than any punishment because the soul finally sees what it has become. There is no denial in that moment, no lies, no running. The soul realizes that it had thousands of chances, through suffering, through guilt, through the quiet voice of conscience, yet rejected them all. It sees how many times grace tried to reach it, how many times it was touched by light but preferred darkness because light required humility. Padre Pio said the most tragic part is not God's judgment, but the soul's own recognition that it chose its fate. God does not condemn instantly. He reveals. And the soul condemns itself by refusing to let go of its sin. This self-condemnation is the ultimate agony, knowing heaven was possible. Peace was offered, forgiveness was always within reach, yet ignored. In that moment, Padre Pio said, the soul finally understands the full cost of a lifetime without repentance. And the weight of that truth becomes its everlasting companion. According to Padre Pio, the greatest tragedy of a soul that never repents is not the fire, the darkness, or the separation. It is the eternity of regret. He said that once the soul crosses into the next world, time no longer exists. There are no tomorrows left, no more chances to change, no more opportunities to ask for mercy. The choices made in life become permanent, like stone that cannot be reshaped. Padre Pio explained that such a soul is not forced into despair by God, but by itself. It carries the full weight of every rejected grace, every ignored warning, every moment when God whispered gently but was silenced by pride or indifference. The soul realizes that the very love it once resisted is now the love it can never experience again, and this understanding becomes an endless sorrow. He said the soul wanders in a state of spiritual emptiness, longing for a light it can see but never reach. It remembers the people it hurt, the kindness it refused, the forgiveness it never sought. These memories do not disappear. They accompany the soul like shadows that never fade. Padre Pio emphasized that the eternal consequence is not simply punishment. It is separation from the one the soul was created for. And nothing in the universe is more painful than realizing you were made for love, but chose a path that leads away from it forever. This, he said, is the destiny of a soul that never repents.